Hello everyone and welcome to a new tournament that is happening online. At the moment it is the Nations Cup and it is 6 nations battling it out to see who will reign supreme basically. The 6 nations are United States, Russia, India, China, we have Europe and the rest of the world. We're gonna get into details who's playing for who after we check out the game, and we're gonna check out some standings as yesterday 2 rounds were played. I don't know how many games I'm gonna be able to cover from the event, but when a game is as interesting as this one, we are definitely going to cover it. So it's a game from round 1, United States versus India, Fabiano Caruana versus Vidit Gujarati. And it is quite the game. So without further ado, let's check it out. So Fabi with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5, going for the Ruy Lopez, and knight to f6. Vidit goes for the Berlin defense. We have d3 by Fabi and bishop to c5. So this is all very standard stuff. We have bishop to a4, castles by black and castles by white. We have d6 and now c3, making room for the light square bishop. We have knight to e7, shifting the knight over to g6, and rook to e1. We have knight to g6 and now knight b to d2. White also wants to transfer the knight over to g3. And there is one game in the database that reached this position where bishop to g4 was played. It was the game Wesley So versus Sergei Karyakin from the Riga Grand Prix in 2019 that ended in a draw. But here we have c6 by Vidit, and it is a new move. So already as of move 10 we have a completely new game. c6 preparing the early d5. So Fabi continues, knight to f1, he's shifting the knight over to g3, and like I said, the immediate d5. And okay, Fabi captures, and now knight captures on d5. If you want to capture with the c-pawn and sort of create a very strong center, white will still ruin it by playing d4, so you don't really get a strong center. You're just going to get an isolated d-pawn, which white will be able to play against in the future. So instead, knight captures on d5 by Vidit, and now knight to g3. We have rook to e8 and now h3. We have bishop back to b6, and white goes back with the bishop as well. Bishop to c2, and now h6. Black also wants to shift the bishop over to c7. We have bishop to d2, and now comes bishop to c7. As planned, we have d4 now. White strikes in the center, and e captures on d4. We have a trade of rooks, rook captures, queen captures, and now knight captures on d4. And here, bishop to d7. And if you look at the position is almost completely identical. All of the pawns are on super symmetrical squares, as you can see. The knights also, these knights also, the bishops also. As you can see, everything is perfectly symmetrical, except the queen. As you can see, if this queen was here, then we'd have a completely symmetrical position. So it's fair to say that the position is around equal. So Fabi goes queen to f3, develops the queen, prepares to bring the other rook into the game, and queen to e5. Vidit centralizes the queen now, wants to shift the queen over to d6, and also if this knight ever moves, you can just infiltrate with queen to h2. So rook e1, Fabi kicks the queen away. We have queen to d6, and now king to f1, not allowing any future knight jumps to come with checks if that happens. And also the king will add additional protection to the rook. And also if everything else trades off on the board, your king will be one step closer to improving the position of the king. So knight e5, attacking Fabi's queen. We have queen back to e2, and only now rook to e8. So, of course, you do not want your queen on the same file as the rook. But first, knight d to f5. Challenging Vidit's queen, we have queen back to f8, and only now queen to h5, getting the queen out of the way. And here we have this extremely complicated position where Vidit has to decide what to do. As you can see, both players have an almost fully operational bishop pair, so it's not very common to see this. And you have to check, is this a threat, is this a threat, is this a threat, what threats are there? So here Vidit decided to remove one of the attackers by playing bishop captures on f5, but the downside is that he loses the bishop pair. The absolute best here, there are a couple of good recommendations, but knight to c4 seems to be the way to go. However, here you have to really calculate everything. If bishop captures on h6, then what happens? Of course, you cannot capture because then just knight captures and you're getting destroyed. King here, knight f5 check, captures, and you're just getting destroyed. Queen h4 check, King g6, you can trade here, captures, and let's say queen to h6 is checkmate. But you have to find that after knight to c4 in this capture, you can actually go rook captures on e1, but it requires a lot of calculation. King captures here, now you go queen e8 check, king goes back, now you capture on g3, sorry, after the king moves, you capture on g3, and now if you allow pawn captures, then you allow the knight to jump to e3, so you kind of have to pick it up with the knight, or you don't, you could even just go. Wow, sorry about that. The interface kind of went silly. Instead, you could go just instead of capturing the bishop, you could go just knight captures on g7, and then it's who could calculate this position from that position where you have to decide what to do. Here, if you found queen e5, then it's okay, and you will probably have a good game, but this is complete madness. Even though the engine gives here a 0-0, in the actual over-the-board chess, no one would really assess this as an equal position. So instead of going into all of this madness, Vidit eliminates one of the attackers with bishop captures on f5, and now we have some trades. We have knight captures on f5 and knight to g6 now. Adding another defender here, also offering a rook trade. So we have rook captures, queen captures, and now g3 by FIDE. Not allowing any knight jumps, also numbing the bishop here on c7, and knight to f6 by Vidit, pushing back the queen. We have queen to f3, and now queen to d8, putting pressure on the bishop, but also just preparing queen to d5 to offer a queen trade. So bishop back to c1, and the queen to d5, offering a queen trade, which FIDE accepts. He has the two bishops, and he's down to play this endgame. So queen captures, knight captures, and now both players start improving the position of their king. King e2, we have king to f8, we have h4 by FIDE, preparing also h5 to grab more space on the king side, and knight to e5 now. We have bishop to b3, and now knight to e7, offering a trade of knights, which FIDE happily accepts, captures, and now h5, grabbing more space on the king side. We have knight to d7 by Vidit, and now bishop to d1. So he switches the knight over to f6 as the h5 pawn is now under attack, but now king d3. The bishop does a nice job defending it. We have bishop b6 going after the f2 pawn, and now f4, and the g6 now. FIDE trades, we have captures, and now king back to e2. Now the king is coming to f3. We have knight to d5, and now king to f3. We have h5 by Vidit, and now bishop to d2. So slowly but surely, FIDE making sure that his bishop pair is covering pretty much all of the squares the knight can use, and then only then will he start expanding on the queen side. So king to f6. And c4 now. So it is an equalish endgame, but as the play is on both sides of the board, and FIDE does have the bishop pair, white is to be preferred. We have knight to e7, and now bishop to c3 with check. King e6, and now b4, grabbing more space on the queen side. We have knight to f5, and now c5, cutting off the dark square bishop to c7, and only now bishop to b3 with check. So you can see that the bishop pair is doing quite a lot of damage here. King to e7, and now bishop to c4, just grabbing more space. We have b6 challenging this structure, and then now a4. FIDE, of course, doesn't want to allow something like captures and then give the knight the d6 square. He wants the pawn to remain on c5. So b captures, and now b captures on c5. So Vidit ruined FIDE's pawn structure on the queen side, but FIDE still controls the d6 square. So king e8, and now even a5. We have bishop to d8, and now bishop to d3. Bishop to e7, putting pressure on the c5 pawn, and bishop back to b4. We have bishop to f6, and now comes even a6. So you have to be careful so you don't run into something like eliminating this pawn, but this bishop here is pretty much stuck guarding the c5 pawn. Black will immediately go after it if white decides to go, for example, to go after the a7 pawn. So bishop to e7, Vidit doesn't allow the bishop to move, and now FIDE finds a breakthrough on the king side. g4, we have h captures, king captures, and now knight e3 check. We have king to f3, and now knight back to d5. Knight back to f5 seems also like a reasonable option, just not allowing any ideas to white, but Vidit goes for an active plan. He goes for knight to d5, which involves a temporary pawn sacrifice, but he will win it back. So he gives it up with check. Bishop captures on g6 with check, king f8, and then now bishop to a3 as the bishop was under attack. We have knight to c7 going after the pawn here, bishop to d3, Fabi defends it, and now knight to e6 with a double attack on the c5 pawn. So this is how he wins the pawn back. Bishop to c4, and now just knight captures on c5. So Fabi now has a passed f pawn, whereas Vidit has a passed c pawn. Bishop back to c1. And now knight to d7. We have king to e4. Fabi starts improving the position of the king. And as you can see, Fabi's king is much more active than Vidit's king. We have bishop to c5, cutting off the white king. And the king to f5 now. We have king to e7 and now bishop to b2, controlling the f6 square. We have bishop to e3, not allowing the king to go any further as you're gonna blunder the pawn. And now bishop to e2, shifting the bishop over to this diagonal. We have knight to b6 and now bishop to f3, forces the pawn to move. We have c5 and now bishop to f6 with check. King to f7 and now bishop to h5 with check. We have king to f8 and now bishop to e5, defending the pawn, so now the king can move and you can start pushing your pawn. Vidit also starts pushing his passed pawn. We have c4 and king to e4 now. For the moment attacking the bishop, bishop to c5 and only now f5. We have knight to d7, attacking the bishop here, and bishop to c3. Nice square for the bishop, blocking the passed pawn. We have bishop to e7, now keeping an eye on the f6 square with both the bishop and the knight. And here, bishop back to e2, going after this pawn. And knight to c5 check now. Not defending the pawn, but rather going after the a6 pawn. So Fabi says, okay, we have king to e5, and now knight captures on a6. Bishop captures on c4, and now even these two pawns get traded off, and now it's Fabi with the f pawn and Vidit with the passed a pawn. So knight back to c5, and here bishop back to d2, shifting the bishop over to the king's side. We have knight to d7 with check, king to e6, and knight to c5 with check. Vidit doesn't allow the king to remain there. King to d5 now by Fabi, attacking the knight, and king to g7, still keeping control on the f6 square, not allowing bishop to h6. We have bishop back to e2, and now king to f6, saying my king is very happy there. We have bishop to g4, defending the pawn, and now knight to d7. We have bishop to c3 check, king to g5 now. You have to go to h3 to both save your bishop and the f5 pawn, and bishop to f6 now offers the trade. Of course, Fabi declines, bishop to d2 check, king h4, and now you have to move the bishop to f1. And bishop to g5 now, again offering a trade here, which Fabi of course declines, bishop back to b4. And knight to f6 with check. We have king to e6, and now knight to e4. And here Fabi plays bishop to d3, and we reach sort of a critical moment of the game where Vidit played knight to g3 here. He played knight to g3 and he allowed this pawn to start marching forward. Point is, you have to go knight f6, but it's also not clear how are you going to play this game, because you could run into trouble, for example, after bishop to e2 and this check here, but well, it's very complicated. For example, if king g3, you're gonna go here, bishop to e1 with check, and now you have to go back. If you go here, then just bishop d2 check picks up the bishop. So you have to go to the h file, and then again bishop to c3 goes after the knight. But now you have to go knight to e4, attack this bishop here. And the point is now you don't have time for f6 because black can just capture, and after f7 you still defend the queening square with bishop to h6. So it does seem like knight to f6 was the way to go, but Vidit went for knight to g3, and he decided to try and hold this, being down a piece. So Fabi pushed f6, and now of course you cannot prevent queening, as the bishop also covers the f8 square, so bishop to h6 doesn't really help you. So here Vidit just gave up the bishop. So king captures, and now king to g4. So of course we know that two bishops against the king are winning. How about two bishops against the king and knight? So let's see how Fabi goes about this. King e5, and now king to f3. We have bishop to a6, blocking off that passed pawn. So now you can even just win it with bishop c5 captures on a7. We have knight to a2. Of course, you can never trade. If you ever trade, it's just a draw due to insufficient material. So bishop to d2, not allowing the king any additional squares. Knight back to g3 and bishop back to g5. We have knight to e4 attacking the bishop, and now bishop to b7, seemingly winning a piece, but not really, because Vidit has king g4. Now he wants to trade, which of course you cannot allow. Bishop back to e3, and now knight to g3. We have bishop to f2, and now a5. Vidit starts pushing the passed pawn, but of course, that pawn will never reach any destinations. You will just capture it. So bishop to c6, and here Vidit just gives it up with a4. We have bishop captures on a4, and now king f3, going after the bishop, and bishop to d4. So now you need to create walls against the white king and the knight and really push them into a corner. So king g4, and now bishop to d1 with check. We have king to g5 and bishop to e3 with check. King g6, and now bishop back to c2 with check. We have king to f7, and now bishop back to d1. So not allowing the knight any jumps. You're controlling a lot of squares here, which the knight can use to jump around. So king back to g6, and now just king e6. We have knight to h5, and now bishop to c2 check. So you can see all of these squares are taken from the black king. You can only use these squares. Sorry, like that. So king g7, and now king to e7, knight back to g3, and now bishop to d3, just controlling all of the squares the knight can use to jump around. So the knight has to go back, and now bishop to g5, taking away the f6 square from the knight as well. So knight back to g3, king e6, again, the knight has no good squares. Knight back to h5, king f5 now. And now, of course, if you go knight g3 check, then the king just goes here, and you're going to lose that knight. So king to f7, and now bishop to c4 with check. We have king to g7, and now bishop to h4, not allowing the knight to jump to g3. So king to h6, defending it, and now bishop to f7. Again, if the king moves, you just lose the knight. So knight to g7 with check, and now king to g4. The king doesn't have any squares. You have to go here. So king h7, and now king to g5. Again, the knight has no squares. The bishop covers everything. So if you move the knight, you lose. King h8, now king to g6. And here you no longer have any squares for the king. You have to move the knight. So here knight to e6 was played. And of course, you all see what happens next. I hope none of you were considering capturing the knight. If you capture the knight, it's of course stalemate. Not a lot of fun in that, since you already played such a wonderful game. So here, after this knight to e6 move, Fabi just played bishop to f6 check. We have knight goes back, and then just bishop captures on g7, and we have the double bishop checkmate. So yeah, really an exciting game, and it was really an important game since USA lost on board 4, and then Fabi really needed a win for USA to equalize against India. But as I don't know how many games I will show you. These are the results from round 1, and these are the results from round 2. So as you can see, in round 1, Europe drew against Russia, with the winners being Vladislav Artemiev and Yang Krzysztof Duda. Then we have China won against the rest of the world with a result of 3-1. Wang Hao, Wei Yi, Yu Yangyi, and Hou Yifan on board 4. And also, I forgot to mention, every team has a woman on board 4. So as you can see, in Europe and Russia, Anna Muzichuk drew against Alexandra Goryachkina, and for the rest of the world, we have Hou Yifan won against Maria Muzichuk. And then we have India and United States. You can see that Hampi Konero won her game, and Fabi really needed to win to equalize. So India and USA drew their match. And here we have some games from round 2. Russia lost to the United States with a 3-1 result. The winners being Nakamura and Caruana against Nepomniachtchi and Artemiev. Rest of the world defeated India with the only win by Jorge Cori. Really, well, a small upset definitely against Bhaskaran Adiban. And it's a really exciting team, the rest of the world. Rajabov on board 1, then Firuja, Jorge Cori, and Maria Muzichuk. Really an exciting team. And here we have Europe against China. Europe lost with a result of 1-3, with the winners being Yu Yangyi and Zhu Wenjun. And also, I think it's interesting to mention that Kasparov is the captain of Team Europe, so I'm sure that he's not very happy that they lost. And these are the standings from FIDE's official Twitter account. There you see China is in the lead, followed by USA with 3 points, rest of the world with 2, and then with 1 point India, Russia, and Europe. So those were the standings. I do hope you enjoyed that as well, and we will cover some of the more interesting games, especially if you check up one that's interesting. Do use hashtag suggestions so I notice it. So yeah, that's the game, really exciting. So now you know that 2 bishops against the king is always winning, and 2 bishops against the king and knight is also always winning. So just put it in as well. Very instructive game by Fabi, and also a very good game by Vidit. But yeah. I would like to thank Frank Combs, Thomas Schreiber, Melvin Zhao, George Dell, and Samuel Perlman for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Nations Cup and whatever else happens in the chess world. But also, we are continuing our Morphy saga and whatever we had planned. So yeah, thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.